3.
Wow. You see, that is a dramatic pause right there. I was just watching the other day, Eric, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Skynet.
Oh, the second best Terminator.
You think it's the second best?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Go.
Because when the original Terminator came out, they didn't advertise it so that you knew that Arnold Schwarzenegger was the bad guy, or that Reese Kyle. You didn't know whether the Terminator or Reese Kyle was the bad guy.
Right.
You didn't even know that he was a cyborg. It was kind of the way they released Matrix, where it was like, what is happening? I don't know. And I think both were revolutionary at their time as far as special effects.
Yeah.
I think just because of our generation, we're a little more focused on some of the liquid metal stuff that we saw and all that. And it really sets the tone. And I think the original Terminator there was nothing really like it at that time, while Terminator 2 was a great movie, but it was not alone in that space at that point in the early 90s.
This damn hipster. So he's going for the OG source, which I can understand and respect. You also brought up the whole point that basically the marketing was such in the first movie, the lack of, that you didn't know who was good and who was bad, but that's separate from the film. If you just show the film to someone.
Well, I'm a shallow person, so I only care about the marketing and like the. I
well, that's why we do bodybuilding.
One.
Obviously.
I just saw a trailer back in '84 when
yeah.
I was 1, and that really kind of.
If everyone wants to know the real reason why Eric picks Terminator 1 over Terminator 2 Ultimate Bodybuilder, he's like, Arnold just looked better. Like, you see Terminator 2 when he comes out, he's past his prime, he's in his 40s. Terminator 1, he had to be in peak physical condition. That's a Terminator.
Yeah, he was only 3 years after winning the last Olympia win.
That's what I'm saying.
And what a transition to talk about the intersection between technology and culture.
Yeah. Hey.
Man.
Wow, we're dead on it. And someone said in the comment section, Eric, they said, can Eric and Omar ever do a transition without recognizing that they're doing a transition? And the answer is no.
No, in fact, we just did a transition, recognized a transition, and then recognized that you recognized us recognizing the transition. So I think we broke like the 8th wall there. I don't even know.
No.
But anyway, to actually make good on this transition, this is a really cool episode because we're bringing on people to talk about the intersection between fitness, lifting, and technology, specifically startups in the app-based space. The only reason you can talk to me and Omar is because it's the modern age. He grew his popularity and his fan base on YouTube transitioning from being a trainer. I did the same thing in blogging and YouTube and Instagram and into academia from being a trainer as well. So these only traveling to seminars or only seeing people in person or seeing someone on, morning shows, it's not a thing anymore. And we've talked a lot about how that's a negative, like some of the downsides of social media and how, it can bring out or highlight the worst aspects of the fitness industry. But I think it's also worth spending some time talking about the good that can come out of using technology for fitness.
Absolutely. And that's why, once again, Eric curating the best guests. Okay. You got the Midas touch when it comes to guests. We have 3 individuals who have that intersection between fitness and technology and have essentially apps to help make lifting easier or to integrate it better into someone's life. And actually, all of them, I think. You have a special relationship with Obi. We got Obi, Eric, and Nitty on here talking about technology, talking about these apps. I've used actually 2 of them. I've used Gravitas. I like it a lot. I've also used Fit Genie, which, Eric, what is, I don't want to get it wrong, your relationship with Fit Genie?
Yeah, so I came on as an advisor for both Gravitas and Fit Genie, but Fit Genie, I'm actually one of the founders.
Yes.
And we kind of built, while it's a smaller part of the app now, which we can talk about how pivots work and kind of the startup
Ooh,
field.
I love a good pivot.
Oh, a good old pivot, yeah. The original app was largely built around the idea of having an algorithm-based machine learning guidance for your nutrition, and we kind of modeled it based off the decisions I would make based on changes in weight and adherence to specific target macros, and then kind of building out, giving you individualized macros, and then helping you fit foods to them. Yeah, so a little more of an in-depth role there at the start, although it's changed directions. And then, we're both advisors for Gravitas and know Eric, and he's doing really cool things in that space. And Nitty started Spitfire, which was a training apps catered towards female lifters. And then she partnered with Eric, and they're doing some really cool things. So we're excited to talk to all three of them.
Yeah, and this, for anyone that's listening out there, I'm sure every single person has used, to some extent, something like a MyFitnessPal in order to track their macros, and they've noticed how, once again, Eric talked about with the advent of the internet becoming more popular, how it's been easier to do some of these things. Listen to your favorite communicator, as something as simple, once again, tracking your macros. How would you do it before having an app or having access even to the internet? You would have to learn either by a book or something, maybe a coach, and then you'd have to estimate, write it down, check, verify it afterwards. The goal of a lot of this technology is to make the whole process easier. And so I'm excited to have three individuals who are in alignment with that goal. So no fluff, just quality.
Absolutely. So join us for this cool discussion with these three folks.
Yeah, as Arnold would say, come with me if you want to
have an app.
I was going to say lift. It was like, play on the Terminator, come with me if you want to live, but
I've never heard that. Never heard that line. Again, I only saw the trailer when I was 1. So.
Oh, yeah. I've not seen it. Well, I'll end it with this note. I was 2 years old, and I saw Terminator 2 in movie theaters, and I turned out fine. So take that with that what you will.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we have a very important question to ask everyone here. We're joined today by three individuals that covet technology, and we want to ask you the question, what's the superior film, Terminator 1 or 2? There's one right answer, but we'll go around kind of clockwise. Nitty, your choice.
Ooh, what if the answer is I have seen neither of them?
Okay, says a lot about you. We're going to move on to Obi.
I've got some additional bad news.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've never seen either.
No. Oh, Wagner.
Goodness.
Wagner.
We have to rethink this whole podcast.
Eric, can we just cut?
Both solid.
We cut the feed, right?
Well, yeah. Just we're gonna do it live though. We're gonna do it live.
Yeah, guys, it's been
okay.
And this has been the technology episode. We appreciate everyone.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Okay.
You're welcome. Yeah. I gotta go with one, man. The classic. I really enjoyed both, but
Okay.
One's
the podcast
started it all.
can continue. we can continue now. Now that you agreed with me from that you didn't know you were doing that, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned that people developing apps are not aware of Skynet and the potential dangers, especially when it involves machine learning. Obi. So that's okay.
Or let's give a more contemporary movie recommendation before we dive right into this. Ex Machina. Yes, we've seen that. Anyone?
I have seen
That's
that.
a good movie. I have.
Oh,
Obi, my God, you got to see these movies.
If any movie question you ask me, it's probably going to be I haven't seen it.
okay.
That's because Obi is on that grind.
Well, that and I also, for whatever reason, I fall asleep when I watch movies, so I don't do them.
That makes sense. I wish I could fall asleep on command with something, because I would do that every bedtime instead of staring at the ceiling, having an existential crisis. So let's actually get started before I start crying.
Good segue, man. Great.
Yeah, perfect. I'm crying.
Coach.
Let's start.
There's like one lone tear coming out of your eye as you carry on with the podcast.
Let's just start. Why do we
Best start ever.
Thank you. First off, I'm honored to have Obi Anachebe, Nidhi Kulkarni, and Eric Wagner on to join us. These are three individuals who have started apps in the fitness and nutrition space, which I think is a really cool way of connecting lifters. And honestly, it's a great application of technology. And I think that they're cool. And, full transparency, I'm involved with both Gravitas and Fitchini. So this is an entire shameless plug episode to make me more money.
Yeah. If you want to know when we're going to
true.
sell out, everyone listening, this is the episode.
It was 3 episodes ago, and now I'm really just going all in. Yeah,
turning it up a bit.
So I think, I would love to give our audience just the chance to get to know each one of you a little bit. So just starting kind of clockwise on my screen, Nidhi, can you introduce yourself and let us know how you got interested in fitness and what you're bringing to the fitness community?
Yeah, so I've been an athlete for a long time. So I started out as an endurance athlete, didn't do any type of lifting or any type of resistance training. And then eventually, by the time I got to MIT, I transitioned from being a runner to being a rower. That's kind of the first time I started lifting or even tried using a barbell. And then after that, I got into, I tried Olympic weightlifting for a while and eventually transitioned into powerlifting, largely prompted by working on Spitfire Athlete, which was a company that I started after graduating.
Awesome. And we'll definitely ask you a lot more about Spitfire in a moment, but welcome, and we appreciate that introduction. Eric, tell us about yourself, my friend.
So for fitness, for me, in high school, I did tennis and cross country, and actually, when I was a kid, I did karate. So that was sort of like my start in fitness, but I was super scrawny. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have a similar story where when I graduated high school, I was 143 pounds and 6 feet tall. And that was, I kind of was like that all of freshman year in college. And then a friend of mine encouraged me to start lifting sophomore year. And prior to that, honestly, like the only thing I'd done, like, after high school and the first year of college, I was just running a lot. But that helped me maintain my really scrawny stature. But yeah, I really got into lifting weights and got pretty motivated by the fact that you could transform your body. And I mean, I could get into this even more, but a friend gave me a PDF actually way back then for a training program, which I have no idea how he got it, but I followed that for a number of years. And yeah, so I developed this passion for fitness. And I think leading into Gravitas, like I'm a tech guy, product guy. I can get more into my background if you want, but I definitely saw this opportunity to build something that didn't exist for people like me, who are sort of more like casual lifters, and maybe they could help them carve a better path, sort of navigate through their fitness journey a little bit better than I did. So anyway, that's awesome. That's how I got my start.
Very cool, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I do think there's a big market for that, and I think that's something that people don't really acknowledge is that, yeah, we look up to a lot of powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, bodybuilders, but we often try to fit what they do to our lifestyle, sometimes to our own detriment. So I think it's very cool that you're looking to bridge those gaps for sure. Obi, last but not least.
Yeah, I guess for me starting out, I'm from Atlanta originally, and I was always into sports. In middle school, played soccer, played basketball, was trash at both. Ended up playing soccer in high school and became more trash at that somehow. And after high school, I realized like I spent all this time being bad at sports, and I kind of wanted to build my physique and have something to show for my bad athleticism. So that's when I started getting into fitness, looking into, I guess, all the influencers at the time. And for me, like when I first started, I feel like most people, like you look at who's got the biggest muscles and listen to them. And I don't remember how, but I think I came across Matt Ogus, and that's what kind of opened me up to evidence-based fitness and guys like Omar, you. And then from there, like
Please
I
note
realized,
we're
like,
secondary
okay,
and tertiary, Eric, but that's okay.
Hey, well, Matt Ogus comes first in most things. Let's just be honest. So
I wouldn't be surprised if that's most people's exposure to evidence-based guys like you and Eric. But anyway, yeah, from there, I realized I was like, oh, there's a smart way to do this. And I always grew up being a nerd, so I wanted to figure out the most optimal way to build a physique with the least work possible. Nutrition seemed like the thing I could have most control over. So that's when I, came across the pyramids, and then started a club at Georgia Tech called the Georgia Tech Barbell Club. It's basically just an organization for meatheads, and I wanted to indoctrinate this whole evidence-based fitness thing among those 50 to 100 people. So that's when I moved into Fit Genie, because I was like, hey, I'm doing all this free nutrition coaching. There's probably a way to automate. Words are hard. There's a way to automate this. And that's when I started looking into doing Fit Genie.
very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like most of you just had a tech background and got into fitness and decided to merge those two. Is that a pretty simplistic kind of origin story to make it super relatable to everybody? Anybody disagree with that? Can I characterize you that way? Is that all good? All right.
Sums it up for me.
Yeah,
Sweet.
more or less.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
but I think that super undervalues kind of just the skill set you guys have and what you do. And I would love to hear a little more about like what, because typically when I hear someone who gets involved and does a startup, which is no small feat, and it is quite the investment of time, and most fail. It's because they're super passionate about it and they see a problem and an opportunity and step into that space. So I would love to hear about Spitfire and what did you see was missing that you wanted to bring to the table? What was the big idea behind it?
Yeah, so I actually think the reason I got into startups actually predates starting Spitfire. So after graduating, I worked, my first job actually was at a small company at the time called Okta. And I was one of the early engineers there. There were about 30 people when I got the offer. And then they just immediately started growing very quickly. So later that year, there were 100 people. And the year after that, there were 300 people. And then eventually they did end up IPOing in 2017 for like $2 billion. So that experience is really what gave me the startup bug. And that, you know, I realized that I'm really interested in tech. That's my background. That's what I like to do. But I also really enjoy the early the early part of a company. So after Okta is when I decided, I want to start my own. I want to continue to do this. And that's really where I synced up with this woman that I'd met. Her name was Erin Parker, and she had been working on Spitfire Athlete for a while, and she brought me on as her technical co-founder. And what we wanted to do with Spitfire was we felt that there was a gap in the fitness market for products that were geared towards women. They tended to be a lot about cardio, a lot about weight loss. And both of us having, been athletes and have had coaches, we felt kind of surprised by that. And we felt that there should be a product that was more about building your strength or, achieving athletic goals, or if you do want to build your physique, to do so in an evidence-based way. And so that's really kind of the seed of Spitfire. We wanted to create a brand that was for women, that was about getting women that might be intimidated by the weight room or might not have any experience with the barbell disciplines, and make it accessible. And that's kind of how we started it.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because that's something that I've heard from people since I was a personal trainer, to personal trainers who mentored me who were 2 decades older, that is something that, like, hey, everyone can benefit from lifting weights, but there is this kind of barrier to entry that's largely kind of just this cultural intimidation that, even when it's not intentional, it's just not a thing that is done as often, and there's less pathways to access. So I think that's really cool that you were looking for a technological solution to that. So that's very cool. And now you are partnered with Eric, working as a partner with Gravitas. And I would love to hear, Eric, the history of Gravitas, where you see it, what is the vision, and then at the end, if I could hear how you guys became partners, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Gravitas started out as trying to be a social workout tracker. So like I guess through college, and then, my first, for a long period of my life, running and lifting were just things that I would do all the time. Just like go for a few 3-mile runs per week, and I would maybe lift, 2-3 times a week, 2 to 4 times a week. And when I go for a run, I would use Runkeeper, or I discovered Runkeeper in like 2011, something like that. Runkeeper was so cool. It was like you could, you had this app with you, you turn it on, GPS tracks everything you're doing. And then you could see when your friends are running, and I would get super motivated. I had some close friends who were runners at that time. Would find motivation seeing their runs, and it would drive my competitive spirit. Like I didn't want to like slack off when I'd go for a run. It just because I knew everyone would see it. So it actually made me push myself quite a bit. And I now looking back, even I have all these records of PRs in terms of runs that I had that I honestly otherwise wouldn't remember down to such detail. But that was super cool. And when I go to the gym, I think through that PDF, that program that I'd been using for a number of years, I'd gotten used to tracking my workouts. It just like, the PDF tells you what you're supposed to do, and then you fill in what you actually achieved and add some notes there. And I remember this mad frenzy. Anytime I go to the gym, I have to go print out that page for like that workout, and then I have to go find the page where it's like, okay, when's the last time I did this workout, to figure out what my numbers were. And so I naturally looked for an app once sort of the App Store took hold to track my lifts, and found, the best of the tracking apps back then were really bad. And I was at at a design firm in New York called Huge, on their user experience team, and was really passionate about design and UX, and this is what I was doing for my job. And I was just like waiting for so long for somebody to do something better. I was like, there's so many obvious problems with this app. Like, why is nobody, or with all these apps, why is nobody fixing it? At the time, the best app for tracking was this app called, it wasn't one I was using day to day, but I did find an equivalent to Runkeeper, and that was like Photocracy back then. And Photocracy, it was really geared towards motivating people who, my impression, people who don't normally work out, and trying to motivate them to work out with a system of points and badges. And the thing that I always remember is that, like, as part of the motivation is you'd submit your workout, and then this little like cartoon robot would come out and he would say, "Hey, this is Fred. He's calculating your points." And I was like this is, for someone like me, it just wasn't a right fit. And I was like, there must be other people like me who, kind of take the training more seriously. And then the motivation for them is not the points or the little robot or the badges. I think there's definitely a place for those, but there's a lot of motivation in the numbers themselves. Am I progressing in my own training? And so I wanted to create, fill this gap I saw for some people who were not necessarily competitive powerlifters or Olympic lifters or whatever, but just people who are serious about their training. Give them a place to track their workouts and to motivate themselves with their own training, and also to connect with other people to get some of that social motivation and accountability. So that's what Gravitas started out as. And
for one second, I think this is a really good point.
Yeah.
Does anyone know when Excel was created? That program? I'm assuming sometime in the 90s, right?
I think earlier, maybe.
Earlier.
It's very old.
And it fundamentally hasn't changed much at all, since that. And it just speaks to how much lifters, like people who really love lifting and do it for that reason, value seeing numbers and progress, considering that now in 2019, that's still probably the most dominant platform for writing programs. Or using Google Sheets or some variation of it. And it is it's so like below the level of technology or UI, UX, like you were talking about, that we have now. So I think you're 100% right. There's a lot of people who really value like objective analytical metrics. I know I'm one of them. So just the fact that powerlifters in 2019 are using Excel sheets blows my mind in some way. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, I think Excel is interesting. I think, to me, the idea of a spreadsheet, whether it's Google Sheets or Excel, stands the test of time. It's like it's a fundamental thing for, if you want complete flexibility to do calculations, Excel is your go-to, right? And it's if you can't find something domain specific, then you go to Excel. It's the same thing you see in like the finance industry, right? If you're doing business modeling, you're an investment banker or whatever, or you're at a startup modeling your own finances, the spreadsheet is still the essential tool, and it probably will be for a long time. But anyway, I think it's always good if you need that complete flexibility to sort of like dream up anything, but you can definitely get more specific, obviously, to your domain, and maybe hopefully provide a better tool there. So, but coming back to Gravitas, I think that I spent, we could talk about pivots, but I think let me lead up into the Spitfire thing. I spent about a year and a half on that mission of building a social workout tracker, and we found a small audience of people who really loved it. It was successful for a small group of people, but sort of came to a point where, and we can dive into this if you want more on that, but like, my co-founder at the time got burnt out on it, and I ended up being on my own. And really, I realized that although it was a great product and it did a lot of things that we originally wanted to do, it wasn't growing at a pace or producing money at a pace that would sustain itself as a business. So that's when Needy and I, we crossed paths in 2017. Got introduced through a friend, and it's a so we're both MIT computer science undergraduates, and this mutual friend at school was like, hey, he told me, he's like, do you want to meet this other MIT founder with a weightlifting app? I was like, yeah, definitely. Like, let's, like, of course. So we started talking, and just, Nidhi can talk about how she got to that point in her company, but we were both at a point where we were trying to figure out what to do and how we could help each other out. And after a couple months, we realized that we had this shared vision for the future of what you needed. And it wasn't just what Gravitas is doing, and it wasn't just what Spitfire was doing. It was somewhere in between. And obviously we can talk a lot about that, but that's how we got connected, and we decided to join forces.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think we'll come back to this, just how often the story, and almost it's par for the course with startups, that the initial trajectory has to change substantially for it to be successful, or even if it's not successful, So I think that's just knowing that that's kind of that cliche but true thing of the pathway to success. If you've seen those little diagrams online, people think it's a linear line, but it's really that squiggle that eventually gets you there. And kind of the journey and the experience of that squiggle is, I think it'll be cool for people to hear about. So Obi, talk to me, man, about FitGenie.
Yeah. I guess we kind of had a similar start to Gravitas. So Keith is our other co-founder, and him and I have been in this together since the beginning. And when we first started FitGenie, the original goal of the platform was to basically have an app that coaches could manage their clients, and then the coaches could also have the macro adjustments for their clients done automatically. That eventually morphed into an app that was specifically just for athletes, where they could add their macros, and we would write an algorithm that would optimize those macros week to week, basically like a digital Eric Helms. And from there, what we realized is, hey, like entering in your macros is really annoying to do. And even though the algorithm can be awesome, if that part is annoying, people aren't going to use it. We have to build a calorie counter alongside this thing. And that's when we kind of started going down this path of making a calorie counter, adding the features that, MyFitnessPal or our other competitors had, making it look better, making it feel better. And we, I guess for better or for worse, kind of backed ourselves into this app that was a really cool calorie counter that just so happened to change macros, adjust and optimize macros. So our original goal of being this algorithm that optimizes your macros and serving as kind of like a virtual nutrition coach turned into us being perceived as a calorie counter with this cool automated adjustment feature thing. And from there, we were trying to kind of figure out our business model, and it seemed like the next step to that was to now add a meal planner to the app. So we wrote an algorithm that would take those macros that we optimized for you and then create meal plans every day of the week for you. And I'd say like early on, kind of going into the changes that we made, not a big mistake, but a mistake that we made is that we got away from like what our bread and butter was. And we started, I guess, bloating the app with features. And that was for better and for worse, I'd say. But now I think, as we've changed and optimized this app over and over and over again for 2 years, we've kind of started to hone in on building something that, one, we care about, and two, we'd use.
Love it. So I think it would be really cool just to get some insight, because a lot of our listeners don't know what the mindset is, or the drive, or the experience of doing a startup is like, and just like broadly, like what is it like to do a startup, and what is the motivation? Bad. Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what is the motivation that makes it sound exciting, that has you take the less secure position? Because obviously, it's not like any of your CVs are lacking. There are jobs you could all get, and probably have had to get while doing your startup. But what is the drive behind you getting into like tech entrepreneurship and doing a startup?
What Eric is asking... Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, why do you guys currently enjoy not making any money? I think is what he was trying to say in a polite way.
I think a lot of it is similar to, at least for me personally, why I enjoy software development to begin with, is it's about creating something, or I think of myself very much as a creator and a maker. And I think entrepreneurship is sort of a natural extension of that. So you're often creating a product, but you're also creating a company, and you're also creating some sort of change that you'd like to see. And at least for us, we're creating something that we feel like doesn't exist already and that we would like to use. So I think that's a big motivating factor. And then the second motivating factor is as you start to get users and they start to use your product and they enjoy it and they're actually seeing results, that's also motivation. And I remember specifically for Spitfire, when we first launched it and we got our initial traction, one of the first things we did was we added sort of this automated email that got sent out every time someone signed up and asked them, hey, what are you looking for? Why did you download this? Can we help? And we specifically made the email seem like it just came from us directly. It wasn't a marketing email. And we would get people responding with paragraphs and paragraphs about what they were looking for. And I didn't realize it at the time, but those responses and that direct feedback from people that are using something that you've created actually fueled us for a long time.
I can see that being like really fulfilling to get an idea of, just to directly see how you're impacting people. That's cool.
Yeah, there's no barrier between what you've created, what you've put out there, and the feedback that you get. If you're working at a larger company, there's so many layers between what you did and the user feedback that you get from that.
Yeah, I don't think people get that either. When they're interacting with an app, they don't know that it's a startup or that it has a huge company behind it. And sometimes they'll, like the questions that when I post about, Ficini, or I post about Gravitas, sometimes the questions I'll get, it's like this assumption that it's this huge intricate thing going on. And I'm like, paid $2 million to endorse it like I'm George Clooney or something like that. And I'm like, nah, man, like this is another dude who lifts, and he contacted me, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. And we made an Instagram account. Like, it's nothing crazy,
Yeah.
So that's that I think that's something that from the consumer side you just don't see, which is kind of cool to get that kind of behind the veil look into your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also kind of hard from the side of the founder, where you'll get emails, well-intentioned emails, kind of asking for things that you're like, whoa, like, dude, we can't build, XYZ feature. Like I'm worried about making money the next week to pay rent, or I have to take up a job and work a 9 to 5 in order to keep this thing going. So sometimes you get those emails, but at the same time, like, you do need customer feedback and user feedback in order to make your product the right way. And I think like that's one thing that I really appreciate about the evidence-based community, is that they're very vocal about what they do and don't like. And that helps a ton, especially when you're an early startup and figuring out what direction to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to wait around to get criticism.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I got an answer to in terms of why I decided to go the entrepreneurship route. I kind of like Nitty. I really, even as a kid, I enjoyed creating things to help other people. Like I remember, I was into computers from an early age, and I enjoyed even something simple as like setting up our family computer so it would work better for, my parents, right? I worked in the school computer lab. There's a lot of like these threads, even going back to childhood, where I just enjoyed, taking an area where I could create something and where I had some sort of expertise and trying to use it to help other people and creating something that other people would find valuable. And so I think, from an early age, I had that bug. And then, we saw this sort of like rise of startups being a computer science major, right? Like friends are doing startups. I worked at Microsoft for a while and had friends leave to do startups. And I was just, I was the kind of person who always had ideas about things that tech could solve. Mm-hmm. And, at a certain point, so for a while, I really knew that I wanted to start something, but I didn't know what it would be. And I would constantly have ideas about it. But I knew in the back of my head that, people who were, kind of like me were starting companies and making a difference in the world, and I wanted to try my hand at that. It was it's something I'd never done. I feel like it was the kind of thing that if I never tried it, I would regret it. So just got to give it a shot. Try creating something of value out in the world for other people. Big motivator.
I think that's why I connected with all you guys, is because it's not really that different from. I mean, obviously, I'm not a tech guy at all, but I see myself as doing some artistic expression through making content, even though it's like science-based nutrition and training information. And I've obviously started businesses that aren't tech-based, but I think it's the same thing. I can relate to that. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Omar, like, I guess I would like to hear how because you started or been a part of Arboros, and also you've got involved with Position, and you also have Kaizen.
Done many failed businesses. Let's go down the list.
I guess I want to hear, like, how does your motivation differ from them, or do you have a different experience or reason for you? Like, what drove you to not just be a personal trainer?
Yeah, I think the intention is the same, and it's how you express that intention that might just be different. What you think you could do or make the biggest impact on. I mean, you didn't note this, Eric, but when you said if you're creating content as part of your artistic expression, have you seen his breakdancing people? I mean, that's just another component of who you are. And so, Obi, like, you did note that basically, yes, Fit Genie is a digital Eric Helms, but it's with 50% less breakdancing. And so is that really a net win? And these are the things we have to contend with. I think the intention behind our endeavors are the same, and that is to obviously try and improve the industry. We see something that has, I wouldn't say problems, but areas to improve. So for the pre-workout Ouroboros, the whole idea was to make a clean, effective, affordable pre-workout without any of the marketing gimmicks seen in the supplement industry. Same kind of idea when it came to Position, when it came to shoes, where Nike and Adidas essentially just had a monopoly on shoes because they had the name brand recognition. But were they servicing the customers, the lifters, with their best interest in mind? There are these huge companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, that their weightlifting side is just a very small portion. And actually, if you look at the shoes they've been producing over the last 20 years, they've been attempting to save more and more on their costs at the sacrifice of the lifter. Like, their old lifter Adidas, the Adistar, is their gold standard, but they've since gone with synthetic plastic materials, not as durable, all these things. So I think just seeing where you can fit in or where you could be of greatest utility is important. And I actually, the question that I would pose as someone who's been in the fitness industry for a long period of time to you three would be, how in qualitative ways has technology improved, in your opinion, the average lifter's experience? So if their goal, whatever their goal might be, just describing ways, both being a user, so someone that might use some of these things or use your own apps, and then two, as a lifter going through this lifting journey. Because I can say for myself, I know we kind of shat on Excel a little bit, but just even using Excel versus writing it down. I like writing down my workouts, but seeing it, in front of you for the first time, like let's say 7 years ago, was an improvement towards my training, because then I could see neatly planned out all these numbers, play around with it, see the big picture, especially when we start talking, mesocycles. So that's one clear example. I remember the first time I used MyFitnessPal, when I was trying to, once again, quantify macronutrients in what I was consuming, and that was a neat, easy way to do it compared to before. So maybe for you three who are so involved in technology, what are some of those qualitative ways?
I think top of mind for me is maybe not a specific piece of technology, but just access to what's right. It seemed like back in the day, people would just kind of do whatever and have their own dogma, or the dogma from the personal trainer from their gym. I sounded like I was from Boston for a second there. And that's what they would go with. And that was everywhere. But now it seems like with different technology, social media, influencers and evidence-based people in the industry communicating what's right in a way that people can understand. Now people have access to training smart and training effectively.
No, I could totally see that.
When I think about how tech can help lifting, I think about it in three pretty big buckets, right? So tracking, social, and information or guidance. And on on the tracking side, right? I think that there's plenty of great ways to track your workouts now. That really, if you go back to like, mid 2005 or so, basically your best tool would be Excel, which is not with you at the gym and is therefore, out of reach for a lot of people, for sort of mainstream, a mainstream audience. To now where it's like, if you discover tracking and you want to track your workouts, you could do that. And that obviously the benefits of that are, you're using your own numbers to almost compete with yourself or hold yourself accountability. So I think that technology, there's a number of companies that have helped on that side. I think social has to do with motivation, right? Like, let's say that you live next door to Barbell Brigade or some, famous gym where there's other, enthusiastic lifters there, other people who are motivated. A little bit of that rubs off on you, but not everyone is right next to that. So Instagram has come up and filled that space. Obviously YouTube. If you want to go and find people to inspire you, you get that sort of social motivation through a lot of different mediums now. And then the guidance. I remember like back in college, it's like you inevitably end up on like a bodybuilding.com forum or like a T Nation forum where some random dude who may have status in that forum is just saying some stuff and you're like, okay, this sounds legit, but then I also read in this other forum the exact opposite thing. Like, what the hell's going on here, right? So having access now to, obviously you guys are, Eric and Omar, you guys are involved in disseminating good information and making it accessible to people, through different mediums there. And then, you look at sort of like there's the unorganized information out there that's sort of sitting, sort of on mediums that are not fitness specific, like, say YouTube, right? Like Omar's YouTube channel is a great example of that. And then there's organized information in the form of like this whole rise of apps and other mediums where if you want to find a plan, you can find them in different pockets, right? You don't have to go the route of, personal trainer, which is out of the price range of a lot of people. Or specifically a coach. You can find them, they're scattered, but there are mediums out there to find a specific plan for you to run. So I think, to me, tech has helped in those three buckets and made each of those easy or easier than they were, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, for me, I would say I'm actually surprisingly a late adopter of fitness technology. Surprising given what I do, but because for the longest time, my only, form of working out was I was either on a sports team. I wasn't really a recreational lifter. I wasn't a recreational athlete, so I always had a coach. And so to me, through school, through college, and a little bit after, I just kind of assumed that the best way to get better at what you were doing is by having a coach write you a custom, basically, training program, and you just went in and you followed that training program. It was only after I sort of left, I was no longer competing, that I realized I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to structure my workouts. I've never bothered learning that. And now, mostly what I do is actually I followed novice bodybuilding on Gravitas for a while as we were building that. And then I am currently doing Average to Savage on Gravitas. And it feels very similar to me, what I used to have, which is someone just telling me what to do every day. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you could obviously follow a spreadsheet. I know a lot of people follow YouTube videos, but I feel that having something that actually adjusts based off of what you're tracking every day and does that for you automatically so that you don't have to think about it, at least for someone like me, is the most useful.
Yeah. Go on, Eric.
No, you go for it, Omar.
I was going to say the social component, Eric. Every time I say Eric, I just want to say Wagner, because I think of because I think you guys both have the name Eric. I'm like, how do I differentiate? But no, for Gravitas, the social component actually I thought was cool, where you guys had in 2018 January in New York, you had a Gravitas meetup, which was super cool. I went to that, but just the whole component where I think you hit the nail on the head, that you named Barbell Brigade, but Barbell is one gym. There's only, maybe in a country as big as America, a couple dozen gyms like that, or with that atmosphere where you go in, it's a community, you're welcome. It just doesn't exist. For the average individual, their experience will not be that. And so I think some of the social components of a community in the place of an app, in the form of an app, can be very useful. We're on Gravitas. I remember, Clarence Kennedy's lifting. This guy, I want to see what he's lifting. He posted a video. Okay, you could check this out. You could leave a comment too, where it is that insular group. And Eric actually Helms spoke about how back in the day, bodybuilding, his logs on the forums, how he would post his training logs and then people would comment. And it had kind of that feel, which I never participated, even though you said, Eric Wagner, you said T-Nation. I got to give a shout out to Professor X. I read the forums. There was a user by the name of Professor X. Dude was jacked out of his mind. That would post, but I never posted a training log, is my point, right? I had a decent community university gym, and then I found this gym called Fortis. But then the online, the extra component, which for me, I also found that utility, and I could 100% see, like, let's say you're someone, I received a message the other day from an individual in, Finland, just talking about trying to find a powerlifting gym or a strength gym. Like, that dude in Finland, it's going to be harder for him to find it. He could find that social support. So I think it's interesting, the intersection of technology, the social aspect, and then how it actually can help amplify both of those.
So I think, man, there's something there. Like, if you can replicate the feel that one of those iconic gyms has, that's so important. I mean, if you look at the history of lifting, communities are built out of these iconic gyms. Like, if you think of Gold's Gym on Venice Beach, or if you think of even further back than that, the gym that originally Sigmund Klein took it over, but it was in New York, where the physical culture movement was over there. And there's tons of examples like that. That's kind of like these hubs of bodybuilding or powerlifting, like West Side, Barbell Brigade, the ones we're talking about now. And I think, given lifting still isn't incredibly popular, that's something that you just have to capitalize on if your app is intended to be social, is to try to give people that same feel and connect them. So that's really insightful, Omar. I agree.
Yeah. Now, we talked about the community aspect from Gravitas. I want to hear, because I think we mentioned it on camera on this episode, Obi, the pivot, which I love the word that Eric used, of Fit Genie. Can you talk a little bit about that, where you said the original idea was that it would be something to help you figure out your macros and adjust on a weekly basis? People's perception kind of was that it was a nice looking calorie counter over time, and you had to combat that. What is now, you said, the pivot you're trying to do when it comes to Fit Genie, or where do you see that future?
Yeah, so basically about this time last year, we came to a crossroads where we were looking at how Fit Genie was doing, the metrics, our key performance indicators, and all of them were bad. And we had to have like a real conversation, amongst, Keith and I, and also our advisor, Dan, and Eric as well. And we were like, dude, like, this isn't going well. We have to figure something out or not do this at all. And so, Dan actually asked me on a phone call, he was like, hey, Obi, like, would you actually pay for Fit Genie? Would you put down your hard-earned money and spend X dollars a month on Fit Genie? And I was like, dude, probably not, man. And he asked, what would you spend your money on? And, I'm a pretty lazy guy, I would say, very lazy guy, actually. For me, the thing that was first thing that came to my head was, if someone were to figure out what my macros are supposed to be, prep all my food and send it to my house, you could have all of my money. And so from there, it became, how do we make that happen, and how do we weave it in with what we already have? And so this new ideas that we've been working on for close to a year now is basically a marketplace for meal prep delivery. So just like in Uber Eats, where you can order food from McDonald's, Fuddruckers, wherever, and it comes to your house, we partner with local meal prep delivery services and allow them to sell food in our app and have you buy it through Fit Genie. And inside of that app, you can also track it, get your macros adjusted, the whole 9 yards. So that's what we've been working on for, like I said, close to a year now. Man, we've gutted our app and rebuilt it 3 times over now. And, Keith and I's background is not in programming. So all this time we've been having to teach ourselves, and a big part of what's taken so long, I'd say, is that when you're learning on the job, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And that's what's happened with us. but we're really confident where the app is going and all the skills we've learned along the way.
So I gotta ask, pivots have got to feel shitty at first, right? Because so what is that experience like when you have to have that kind of come to Jesus talk, and what does that look like on your end? Is how much fear is there, and at what point do you decide this isn't worth a pivot? We need to just close up shop. Obviously, you're not there, but what was it like to have to make that huge? That's a big change, right?
And what's it feel like, Obi, to be in the Matrix? For those that aren't watching, he's in like the background is incredibly white. It looks like you're meeting the architect, if anyone's watched the second Matrix. So it's like, is this your come to Jesus moment right now?
Well, actually, I'm at work right now. That's another thing that happens when you have a startup. You have to work a 9 to 5 to put food in your mouth. So I'm actually in this phone room, which is basically like a prison cell. Yeah. And I come here to get on phone calls and podcasts with Eric and Omar. But yeah, how is coming to Jesus like? I imagine he's a really nice guy, but when it comes to startups, dude, it sucked. I'm not gonna lie, it sucked because for 2-3 years of your life, you put everything into this one idea and you feel like you're one of the good guys. I mean, you're always going to be the hero in your own story. And so when things don't turn over the way you want to, it almost feels like, dude, what the hell? Like, do good guys win anymore? Is everything I thought that was a good idea, is it not? And for us, the decision of whether we keep going with Fit Genie or we just can this and decide something else to do came down to, have we done every single thing we can, exhausted every single idea, flipped every single page, and can we confidently say like there's no salvaging this? And like I said, that phone call with Dan and then our discussions with each other, that wasn't the answer. So that's why we decided to keep going.
I relate to that from a totally different perspective, but it's very similar. That's something that happens with PhDs and master students and PhD students, is anytime you decide to embark on an unknown creative decision, it gets wrapped into your identity, right? You're the hero of your own story. You've identified something, you're going to fix it, and you're going to make your mark. And it gives your life meaning and purpose. That's what creative energy is, right? And so when in a PhD, sometimes you come to a point where you go, you can't do that, or this entire chapter, entire ship needs to get turned a different direction. And that's where people either have these great revelations and do something awesome, or they downgrade to a master's, or just kind of spin out the PhD and never finish it. And I think that's pretty much the exact same thing, right? But man, I can tell you from personal experience and having mentored other people through it, that's hard. And it's painful, and it makes you face a lot of things, and makes you have to, like that's quite the question. Would I buy Fit Genie? And the equivalent question when you do like an applied sports science PhD is, okay, so when you finish this research, is it going to change what a strength and conditioning coach does? And if the answer is no, then sometimes it's like, oh, well, back to the drawing board. So that's something that, like, I got a little bit of chills listening, because I'm like, I remember those moments. Those aren't fun, but they are what makes things go better moving forward, for sure.
It makes me think of the YouTube days, Eric. Back when, before you could be a so-called influencer and derive your primary income from being on social media. I'm talking when Scooby 1961, shout out, was the god, where he had 20,000 subscribers, and that was a big deal. I remember thinking to myself, shit, like getting 5,000 views in a video, just imagine. And so you're on that grind for a year. I started 2009, I was 12. I was a young whippersnapper who thought I knew what I was doing. I'm like, hey guys, in a tight shirt, too tight shirt. But it was a year I went from 0 subscribers to, I think, 350. And then in 2 years, it went to 1,000 and change. And that's a grind, because you're not even close to making any money off of that. Like this is, and I'm talking, it's probably whatever, X amount of hours a week, because you're releasing 3 to 4 videos. You're trying to think of this shit. It's like 10 to 15 at the bare minimum, going absolutely nowhere. And moreover, the space that you're in, no one has shown that it's viable so far to derive your income from it. But you're like, I'm sure something's going to pop up. So that seemingly endless journey. I like that Seth Godin book, Dip, where he talks about any endeavor that you do, you have to find where you are on that path. And sometimes you are closer to success than you realize. And other times when we talk about pivoting, you have to realize when you're at a dead end, and that what you're going to, if you continue going down the road that you are, it's going to lead to nowhere, and figuring that out. So I think having those hard talks are very important.
Yeah. And dude, what you were just saying about no one had proved it was viable yet, that's every startup, because inherently any potentially successful startup is going, right, here's a new idea. And I think a huge part of it is not just solving a problem or doing something that makes people's lives easier, but actually convincing people and showing them that, hey, could you please just pay attention to this enough to see that it would, create some new opportunities for you, and then figuring out a way to make that as obvious as possible. Because it's not just as simple as, yeah, Uber made sense to everyone, so everyone immediately did it. Like there also had to be some social traction.
Yeah, that's actually, Eric, that's a really good question to transition for everyone. Is I've heard now all your apps, I've actually used both of them, and I totally see the utility, but you think to yourself, Eric basically hit the nail on the head where he said, yeah, Uber, everyone's like, of course, I'd use that now in retrospect, but it doesn't work like that. How do you basically, and you're preaching right now kind of to the converted, to us who have used it, and maybe to some of our listeners who also are kind of more on board than the average person, and they're somewhat your audience, but your audience is so much greater than that in scope. How do you basically try and convert people into buying into your apps or buying into your idea that this is of high utility? Because on the surface, on paper, yeah, it checks out. Yeah, I want my workouts to be easier to track. No shit, right? I want to be able to buy a program and follow along. It makes sense, but how do you get someone to buy into that where they become a user? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, so question being, you make a product, the people who find it make sense to them, but how do you go and essentially how do you market it? How do you tell your story to enough people who will convert? Well, first of all, definitely ask Nitty and me in maybe a year. But I think that part of it, well, lots of ways to skin a cat, but I think part of it is selling people on a vision. Like, people want something to believe in, right? And I think that if you can connect with somebody like Nike's a perfect example, actually. Nike is a company where they reach people because you kind of feel aligned with the brand. You just feel like you want to be like a Nike person. You want to be part of that. I think that if you can connect with that, then you can get people sort of moving towards you because they just want to be associated with what you're doing. It's just cool, Now, how to put that into practice is another thing. I think it's a lot of how do you first get on someone's radar the first time you hear about, they hear about you, and then how do you somehow make sure they hear about you again and again, and then at some point in that part in that timeline, how do you get them actually into your app if you're obviously an app-based startup, and then how do you get them to actually buy once they're in the app? It's a multi-stage process, but I think it starts with just aligning with a brand, something they believe in, and also aligning with a real need that they have, later on in that timeline, I actually have been struggling to say, break through plateaus in my training. And here's this app telling me that it's got a plan that will help me, unlock that next PR. I think that's something that, you've got to, that's one point that you can sort of make to get people over the finish line.
Mm.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think there's a difference between getting someone to use your product and getting them to actually pay for something in the product. So we noticed this with Spitfire. I think in order to get someone to pay for your product, you have to be solving a pain point that they have that's actually very painful, and they're actively looking for a solution. To get someone to use it, you can, you just have to pique their interest a little bit. And I think there's obviously a conversion. There's a journey from getting someone to use it, getting them to get, more engaged with the product over time. And eventually you hope that converts into an actual purchase. But with Spitfire, We started out with the entire app being free. All of the training programs were free. We got a lot of users. We had a lot of active users. And at some point, we decided we need to actually see if people are willing to pay for this product in order to validate that this is a good business idea, not just something that people want to use for free. And so when we basically made most of the training programs behind a paywall, a subscription paywall, we saw a dramatic drop off in the number of people that were active. But we did notice that the people that did end up paying for it, they were much more engaged than the free users had ever been. So I think with tech startups, it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg problem. Often you can just focus on growing your user base without having them pay for anything. And the argument is, we'll find a way to monetize this large user base later. And that's valid. That's how a lot of consumer tech companies actually work. But if you want to go the route of being profitable or breaking even early, you need to figure out, are you solving enough of a pain point that people are willing to actually put down money right now for what you have?
Yeah, when it I guess to tack on to that, when it comes to figuring out how to make people want to pay for your app, I have no clue at all how to do that. And I think that's 100% where FitGenie has struggled. And I think a lot of early startup co-founders will probably agree with that too, right? You have like a really awesome idea, or even a better example in the evidence-based community. There's a lot of really smart, awesome minds out there that are, looking at things that people aren't looking at, or they're evaluating research in a way that other people aren't evaluating research. Brilliant minds, but they have trouble when it comes to communicating that to the masses. I think that's what, guys like, not to brown nose here, but guys like, Eric, Omar, Matt, you guys, Jeff Nippert, you guys do a phenomenal job at that. And sometimes it's tough, speaking for myself, when you feel like you have a good product, there's a community of people that also say you have a good product, and the numbers don't show that. I don't have an answer for how you figure out how to market and sell your stuff to people who aren't in your direct community. But Eric, Omar, you guys are successful at that. Maybe you have some wisdom there.
Man, we had a whole podcast with Greg Nuckols and Jeff Nippert, who are kind of, I would say, the current standouts who are able to bridge that gap between the typical lag you see between, not that they're bad people or non-evidence based, but the more kind of standard lifestyle, very visible, quote unquote, influencer versus someone who, like myself or Omar, who's primarily trying to get across good information. There's definitely, that's a hard bridge to cross. And I think a lot of it is time, but a lot of it is also looking towards, maybe they're not just someone who looks amazing and is an idiot and just fell into a lot of followers. Like, perhaps there are things they're doing on the marketing side that we should be learning from. I think, at least speaking for myself, it was a big blind spot, and almost something I looked at derisively, like marketing. I'm above that. I'm an information guy. Like I'm here about, I'm spitting the truth. I'm not going to be deceptive and really kind of just having these very limited, ignorant perspectives on communication, and pretending that a weak point for me was actually something that I was better than, and I think once I made that transition, I was able to make a much more rapid success in reaching people. But yeah, it certainly took years for me to kind of get that. And then to actually, once I got that, I had to actually learn the skill, right? First, I have to acknowledge, I'm an idiot. And then you have to start actually becoming unstupid, which is so that two-step process is by no means simple. And I think that's why you don't see typically one-person startups. Like, startups have someone who handles the marketing side. You have an advisor on the tech side. You have a business person. I've had the fortune of being associated with 3 different startups, and all of them have advisors in different roles. And that's what investors want to see. They want to see you have a fleshed out team who can handle all the different aspects of that business. Because it's not easy.
One thing I was going to say, Obi, just in response where you said about marketing and growing, is that you find answers in the weirdest places. In that I didn't tell Eric this, but we did the podcast with Greg and Jeff, and one of the things that actually stood out that Jeff said as it relates to YouTube and growth, which I've known, but I have a little bit of that Eric too, where it's like, I'm too cool for this shit. Like in terms of thumbnail and title, where it's like, man, like I want to give good information. Forget that, like there's marketing, but I don't want to spend my time thinking about that. I want to be content first, and then how do I frame it? Recently, so what Jeff said, Jeff said there's two essential ways in order to grow a video, get it more views, and they are your thumbnail and your title. And then the third factor that you can't influence, and it's kind of like a snowball effect, would be total views. So if videos are titled the exact same thumbnail, same title, but one has 1 million views and one has 130, the person will click on the one with 1 million views. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But he just reiterated that, and he said something that I've thought to myself for a while, and I did do on occasion, but he said sometimes, and I'm not sure if he said this in the podcast or outside of it, where he said sometimes I'll think of a title and then I'll think of how to make content around that. And actually recently in the last week and a half, I shit you not, I've had 3 videos that I've thought of the title first. Like what's a juicy title in my experience on YouTube? And I've thought of the title, I've thought of a thumbnail, and then I made content around it. And the views are over double, like where they're approaching Christian Guzman levels, where one got like 220,000 views, another one like 190,000. And a normal video view for me, Obi's like, 70,000, 80,000. So over double just by taking an hour to think about what are some juicy titles, how can I make, like also what's a good thumbnail with this, which is just so crazy to think that, kind of aligning to what you said, startups overall, where you're putting in all the work, your content's good. I'm like, yeah, this content has high utility, the stuff that I'm releasing, but I was able to double the amount of people that viewed that content just by, kind of unearthing a stone that I previously thought like, yeah, I could do this, but I didn't really pay attention to that. So I had the entire base the whole time, and then I'm just adding a little extra flavor on top, and now I'm reaping a lot of rewards. What the hell? It almost seems, I don't want to say that it almost seems unfair, but in the sense that like, I'm like, the bread and butter, man, the good content is what I want to focus on. But then this stuff, like as you're saying, how do you get people to view then your app or view the utility of it? This thing's like, once they're in and they see it, that's a done deal. But how do you get the eyeballs in? How do you get people then to start paying? Like those big questions are these barriers that you have to get over. And I could totally feel you on that.
Yeah, for me, that's the perfect marriage. When you have perfect wrapping, perfect nougat gooey filled center, and the wrapping attracts people to the candy, and the candy is actually good.
Yeah.
That to me is like perfect. That's exactly what every startup, every content creator should try and do. But it's always easier said. And speaking for myself, it's really difficult because especially when you're in the weeds, like you're touching every single line of code, you're touching all the text that comes out in the app, all the images, all the animations. You're so focused on the thing working and the thing working well that you forget that it has to be in a nice wrapper. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good the candy is.
No.
And these are skill sets that you have to learn on the fly too. Like, how long is it before someone like me has a marketing person, has an administrative assistant? To be able to learn these skill sets, you have to have the time, and to have the time, you have to have help, and to have help, you have to have money, but you don't have that because you don't have the marketing. So there's this period where you're just floundering, and you just kind of have to get some level of early success or luck even. We brought up Matt Ogus. I think he came at the right time for me, had a channel, was one of the early successful folks on YouTube, and came fortunately at a time in my career where I was actually capable of not being a moron on camera, which I would have been just a year prior. I'd done the work in my case. And I think that's probably also an element that we don't acknowledge, because a lot of good startups, from what I've seen, they have that juicy or sorry, what do you say? Creamy nugget center.
Nougat.
Nougat. We know what kind of candy Obi likes. So I got to write this down for Christmas. But they struggle with everything else. And it's because, like you said, there's no time, there's no energy, or maybe they have overbearing marketing that doesn't know how to connect with what that candy actually is. Or, just connecting those two pieces, it seems simple, but it's absolutely not. And it doesn't happen often.
This, by the way, is very torturous for Sir Eric Helms to hear about chewy nougat. He's prepping How dare you, Obi? Okay, it's like torture porn for him. You're describing, like, you know how the rapper just gets you, and then when it hits your lips, it's just so good. And Eric's meanwhile just thinking, you son of a bitch.
Like, Obi, can you tell me a little bit more about the nougat, and can you describe its flavor and taste? It's just,
I actually have money on the unnamed guys that are showing up to Eric's show, so I'm trying to do a little bit of espionage here.
Oh no,
nice.
Unnamed guy. So your bet
it.
wasn't like I picked this guy. Your bet was anyone but Eric.
Basically,
you can you can see the utility and the value I bring to Ficini when he basically is like, who are you competing against, Eric? I'm like, I'm not sure. Good, I got my money on them because you suck.
That's a clear vote of no confidence. Hey, buddy, they said you were done. They said you were finished. They said you had no chance.
They said I had no chance.
No chance. And that is, hey, I want you guys maybe to speak some, not final words, but transitioning here now to, you're in the belly of the beast, okay? We're not speaking to people that they're looking in retrospect, like we grew this company, it took us 10 years, we sold it off for $2 billion, we're on a yacht, Skyping to you here. You're in the belly of the beast. You're trying to make things happen, and so it's an interesting, and I hear some of that, slight frustration, exasperation, in your voices of this thing that you love. It's like this child that's part of your soul. Any, I don't want to say motivational, but just for individuals, because I've heard, I can't tell you how many people, just me, like they'll try and pitch me on the idea. Someone that wants to do an app, like, oh, I got this crazy idea. Like, so what if, and this was what someone said, what if there's an app, okay, where everyone records their lifts and it's like king of the lift for the day, like where everyone posts, like you have the, no, Obi, wait, just listen for a second, bro, it's genius. Everyone loves to lift and loves to gloat about it. So what if you record a video and then it's like a challenge, 225, who could do the most amount of, I'm like, there's a billion problems with this app idea, but go on. But anyways, so individuals that maybe have, and they want to creatively express themselves in some sort of way, and you guys are right now in the thick of things. Life lessons you've learned, things that you can impart upon anyone that might be listening to this. So it's like, hey, it's going to be all right. Or as it sounds like from you guys, it's not all right. The walls are crashing down, everything's on fire, and the credit cards are about to be maxed out.
Yeah, or at the very least, just like what is it really like to be in this space? What have you learned from it? I think the experience of this is a pretty unique thing. So I'd love to hear from each of you.
Oh man, I got one thing. So when I first started Gravitas, I managed to get in touch with the founder of a very successful startup. Like a name that most people know. And he was down to take a call with me. And we talked about a number of things, but at the end I was like, actually the call was giving him feedback about his product, which I thought was pretty cool. So he was randomly picking people who were using his product to get feedback from. And he was a pretty big established company. So still doing that. I really respect the fact that he was doing that. But I remember at the end of that call, I was like, look, I'm actually starting a startup myself. And do you have any words of wisdom for me? Like any advice you would give me as a new founder? And he was just like, don't do it. That was his advice to me.
Nice.
And I was like, how can you say that? I mean, you've like been super successful in what you've done. So many people respect what you've done, would love to be in your position. He's like, yeah, you didn't see what happened along the way, man. It was so many ups and downs. And people would say that, and I'm sure everyone on this call has heard that before, that startups are like a roller coaster, but you don't really know that or what that means until you actually start. And when you start, it's crazy how high the highs are and how low the lows are. And they can happen. One day you feel like you're crushing it, you're like, something amazing happened. And then maybe even like a few hours later, you're like, oh man, I'm really depressed. Like, something else happened, and you gotta learn to expect that and know that it's par for the course and figure out how to get your way through that, Keep your eye on the fact that you're trying to, what are you trying to achieve here? And why do you still believe in it? And keep coming back to that question to keep you motivated.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Yeah. I think a common thing that you hear when people pitch why startups are awesome to do, or why you should want to try and do your own thing and not work a 9 to 5 is, go out and do what you love. there's a lot of validity in that. I 100% agree. You should go out and do what you love. But sometimes what's not communicated in that statement is you're going to have to do a lot of shit you don't love. You're going to have to be broke for a long period of time. You're going to have to possibly pick up a side job. You're going to have to deal with anxiety and deal with failure and all these things that are packaged around this thing that you love, or, towards the path of building a thing that you love. So, I'd say if I were to give advice around that, it would be mainly what Eric said. Know that your goal is your goal, and also know that even around all of this bullshit that makes it difficult to continue, the regret of not going down that path and seeing if you could end up building what you love and doing what you love, that's probably worse than what's this temporary 2 years of, eating shitty food or, living in a crappy apartment. All that stuff's temporary. And another harsh truth is that, you might start a startup and go through several pivots, and that, this pivot for fidgeting might not go well. That's a harsh truth. That's a harsh reality. But, like Eric said, having that goal and knowing that North Star is something you believe in, pursuing that, I think is how do I wrap this up? Pursuing that is worth all of the effort, I'd say. I'd rather pursue something that might be something that blows up and also love doing it than to be comfortable and never do it ever.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we heard of failed startups in someone's career that then led them to the whole reason you're hearing about the failed startup is because they're eventually successful. So is there any other option in life? And this goes way beyond startups, to not go for what you believe in. Like, what else are you going to do? Is like, we're all going to die. Like, I hate to like make it that crazy, but like, are you just going to like wait until it's gone? Or are you going to do something? And I think that's amazing advice for everything, like in life. Like, if there's a safe option, what are you being safe from? Because it's all got a period on the end of the sentence in the end. So I think that's awesome, Obi.
You thought Eric was done being existential at the start of the podcast. He's been waiting an hour in order to unleash the beast, where he's like, in the end, you got nothing. Might as well go for it.
Yeah, man. The inspiring depression of contest prep sinks in.
Yeah, Coach, you've inspired me into a depression. Hey, or as Kim Mitchell, the Canadian rocker, said, might as well go for a soda,
There you go.
That was the name of a song. It was a smash hit in the 80s. Tells you everything you need to know about Canada.
Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah. Does anyone have any closing thoughts in terms of, any of this stuff here that we spoke about?
Yeah, Nitty, you got any input on that?
Yeah, I think as Eric and Obi were talking, I agree with everything they said. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of ups and downs. And I think what wasn't clear to me when I first started working on startups was how much you're not going to know at every stage. You always think that, if I just work a little bit longer, then everything will be clear to me in a month or in a week. But actually, I think the process is more like I'm just trying to clear away more and more of the unknowns, and it's uncovering new things. So I think one of the major challenges is to make sure that, one, you're being intellectually honest with the new things that you're uncovering, and you're actually looking at, what's happening. And two, that you've given yourself an ability to see what's going on. So you're collecting the data that you need to collect. You're making sure that, okay, if I'm running an experiment, I know if it succeeded or if it didn't succeed. I'm not just going to try random things. And I think doing those things consistently will I hope at least, will keep you on a path that you're making progress. Because if you don't do that, I think it's too easy to just get caught up in the ups and the downs, and I'm happy one moment, I'm sad the next. For me, it's very helpful to focus on the actual process of actual mechanics of what you're doing every day.
Man,
to tack on one thing to that, that what Nitty said about the unknowns, I think is super important, because Honestly, I think if I'm speaking for myself, and Eric Wagner and I have talked about this with each other in private as well, but if I knew how much garbage we would have to sift through with Fit Genie ahead of time, I probably would have been like, yo, I'm out. Like, let me find something else to do. There is definitely some utility in being stupid early.
And yeah, that piece you said about being intellectually honest, like what I heard there, and it may not even be what you meant, is you're going to be the most tempted to buy into the own hype of your product, right? Because you believe in it, you believe in your vision, but you have to be the most critical and the least hype influenced. Because if you buy into your own hype and it's false, there's no hope, because you have to have a really, really objective view of what you can't do and what pathways are actually ahead of you, or you're going to be, running straight off a cliff. And I think that's got to be hard to do, or at least you need to surround yourself with people who can play that role with you.
Right. And I think that's where having a co-founder really helps. Someone that can keep you, can check you when you're saying things that are going off the rails or don't quite make sense. They can keep you on track. I think it's very hard to do as a single founder, is to, you only have your own thoughts. It's very easy to buy into the hype as a single founder.
Yeah, it makes a lot of
sense.
I want to jump in.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to respond to something Eric was saying. I mean, I think that there's definitely this balance between believing your own hype, and then not being stubborn. And you have to play both ends. And I think what you got to do is you got to say, okay, I think, you got to predict what you think would happen. So it's like, oh, if we release, after this new pivot, we expect this, to convert this many new users into paid customers, and you stay true to that vision to see through that experiment, right? Like, you believe in this thing, and you're only going to know if it works or it doesn't if you try it. So people are going to tell you that it's stupid and try to steer you off course, and it'd be very easy to lose focus in getting to the result of that experiment. But I think what's important, and Nina and I have learned this, and obviously this is something we try to put in practice, is, okay, well, when the experiment is done, you've done the thing that you thought would lead to whatever it was. That's when you pause and you look back and say, okay, did it work? Were we right? Were we, what have we learned from here? And what is the next bet we're going to make? And so that's when the humility has to come into play, I think. Stay steadfast, pursue your vision, get that vision out there, and then step back and say, okay, were we right? And how do we course correct? How do we change based on what we learned here? And that requires a ton of humility.
There's a lot of lessons there that extend way beyond startups, I think. So that's been really cool to hear from you all from that experiential side. Is there anything else any of you guys want to add to this discussion before we hear about where to hear more about each of your apps and where to find you?
I would just say, on top of having a co-founder that's willing to do a front flip off the cliff with you, having relationships with other co-founders as well and other startups is so, Eric Helms connected me with Eric Wagner like 2 years back, and we have talked every month since then. That's a massive, massive help, especially when you're caught up in your own thoughts and the ups and the downs. Having another co-founder as well as your own to share what you're going through with, that's very helpful, I'd say.
I actually want to add on to that to say that one reason I find that super valuable is that people who are not, say, entrepreneurs, and it doesn't have to be tech entrepreneurs either, but who are maybe pursuing a more traditional like a corporate job or whatever it is, they just, a lot of times they straight up don't understand. Like, you can't. They're just continuously thinking that are you still trying to do something here? Like, what? Like they're still they just don't really have any insight into that world. And so I think that, like, having your network of other people who are at your stage, it's super important. It helps you. I mean, co-founder can play a part of that role, but also knowing that other companies doing other things are also struggling with these same types of things, and it's not just you. There's other startups having to deal with this, and having someone to be your sounding board, so important. Yeah.
There's a tendency to keep your idea to yourself, and to not share it until it's reached some sort of traction or it seems good enough to share with other people. And I find that getting support from other people, getting their thoughts on what you're doing and your results is far more important than keeping it to yourself until you feel like you have something to share.
Makes sense. Well said.
I'll add one thing on to what Nidhi said, which I think that starting early is also something that I would like. If someone's listening to the podcast and they're thinking about doing a startup, I mean, the path I took was got the startup bug early on, was trying to find like the perfect time to start a startup. And I was like, I went through this whole career path. It was like I was a tech person. I had that kind of background, and I wanted to build up my UX and design skills because I wanted to be that kind of a founder. And I was like, okay, well, if I have all those things and I save up some money, then I'll be really prepared to start a startup. And look, that is definitely one way to go about it. But I think that looking back, I have a feeling that no matter when you start, it's going to be crazy. You're just going to have to learn stuff. And I think learning on the job is kind of the way to do it. And if you start early, then it gives you more breathing room to just experiment and try different things where you don't feel like, I think, life gets more serious as you get older, and I think starting early gives you extra runway to just play around. So,
absolutely, I think that's something that cuts across a lot of things. For example, this is kind of cool. My mom started a PhD just recently at the age of 68,
No way.
Yeah. She's moved out to New Zealand doing that. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can't start that now. It's too late. I should start early. And I think 100%, as soon as you feel driven to do something like that and start be an entrepreneur and get out there, the earlier the better. But the more important thing is act. The earlier you act, like Eric was saying, I think the more important or the more likelihood of success you have, because there's more time for pivots, there's more resources for pivots, there's more time for ideas. And as much as I'm not like a huge fan of the whole Gary Vee just bust your ass thing, one thing that I think he does really well and he talks about is focusing on action and then being able to be flexible when the kind of proto plan you had doesn't go quite according to the way you expected. Because one thing I've kind of taken from this discussion is that no plan survives contact with the enemy. It's always going to be different than you expected. So spending an exorbitant amount of time planning and getting all your ducks in a row beyond what's necessary is potentially just delaying you,
Coach, I got two things to say. The first, I'm going to find a new niche for you.
I'll give you one.
Okay. Well, you're dieting, so I'm going to take two. A new niche for you, and it's going to be called existential motivation. And that is because you just referenced Gary Vee, but I'm going to give you the best Gary Vee story that will motivate you, where someone, he's since risen in social media. For those that don't know, he's an entrepreneur. He's done multiple things, but he's recently become more famous on YouTube, on Instagram for his speeches, talking about being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, running your own life, all those things. Anyways, a video that went viral, Eric, was actually someone ran up to his car. It was just like he was in the backseat, he was driving away, and everyone was surrounding him. He just gave a talk, and they're like, oh, Gary Vee, you're the man, whatever. And someone ran up to Gary, to the car window, and he's like, Gary, please, I want to, just get my shit together. Give me one piece of advice. Like, what's one thing you could tell me? And Gary Vee just says, you're going to die. Rolls up the window and drives off. Boom. There you go, Eric.
Amazing.
That's all you need to know. But he just looks at him in the eyes with kind of like Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder, just a Les Grossman, very intense look where he just says, you're going to die. Rolls it up and everyone, and what's funny, whoever's filming it is like still filming the reaction, and everyone in the crowd's like, whoa. Keanu Reeves is great. That's one, existential motivation, new niche. Think about it. Two,
that guy gets it.
Yeah, he understands that there's nothing. Yeah. So might as well go for soda.
So go for everything.
Go for everything. And then two, I want everyone now to close out. This is going to be the rapid fire round where through pure coercion, we got you guys here. We promise you an opportunity to market your app. You're going to be able to close out 30 seconds, who you are, where can people find you, and why they should choose and download your app. Obi, contestant number one, are you ready?
Yep.
Go.
So you can find Fit Genie on the App Store. Just search Fit Genie. Find us on www.fitgenieapp.com. You can email me. Actually, if you're a startup co-founder, email me. I want to hear from you. obi@fitgenieapp.com. Android users literally started working on that this year. So that's coming end of this year. And then all the pivot stuff we talked about, that should also be out late this year as well.
Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect. Eric?
Gravitas, it's on the App Store. Android coming at some point. It's something we want to do. But, I mean, it's free to download, track your workouts, connect with your friends. You can see videos of other people lifting, as Omar mentioned. But the big new thing for us is the fact that we are now a platform for you to get what we consider the highest quality training programs in the world. So Eric's got a program on there. Kaizen's got a program on there. Clarence Kennedy has one on there. Greg Knuckles has one on there. And it's something that we're excited about because we know how good these programs are. These are the people who know what they're talking about and are basing everything they're doing on real research and not bro science. So I think that if you're looking to break through plateaus with your own training, try out one of our plans.
Perfect. Eric?
Nitty.
Well, I'm working on Gravitas right now, but you can also find...
You get 2 pitches. That's what we're telling you. Every person gets a pitch.
But it's actually going to be 1 pitch because if you are interested in Spitfire Athlete, you can also download Gravitas on the App Store because we will eventually have the Spitfire Athlete programs on there. So look for Gravitas on the App Store.
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, I just want to thank all 3 of you for the insights. I think it's a really interesting intersection now in 2019 where technology is such a big part of fitness. And I think apps are one of those unique spaces where it has cool utility and surprises you and changes the game. And I'm really looking forward to see where each of you go and just appreciate the insight because I think it applies to a lot of things outside of the app space. Yeah.
We just want to thank everyone for being on before Skynet inevitably takes over. And we think it's wise that all 3 of you have chosen to align yourself with the machines, which myself and Eric Helms have chosen not to do. In fact, we're probably going to go into a cave somewhere dark, lonely, isolate ourselves, and ponder these existential questions. Tune in next time.
Lift rocks.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have the motivation to do that, but it's cute that you think
I got
will.
you.
Yeah.
I'll motivate you existentially.
There we go. You just turn to me, deadpan, you're going to die. Well, that's been a fascinating conversation. We appreciate all our guests. Tune in next week to another fantastic episode of Iron Culture Podcast, the premier podcast that takes a social, historical, and cultural, not to mention scientific look at lifting in general. You can help us out on iTunes by leaving a rating and review. It does help us out. You could go on YouTube, where we have uploaded in full HD 4K for your steaming naked eyes these episodes as YouTube videos, and leave a comment, and we'll do our best to respond to those comments, and we'll see everyone in that next Monday episode. Until then, just remember, you're going to die.